Hey guys, it's me, EODGamer here, and in this video, I'm very excited to talk about Boothill. Why am I excited about him in the first place? He is the first 5-star DPS that we have in the game that scales off with Break. I always like it when Hoyoverse is trying to widen the current game state, introduce new characters that does different things. I like it a lot, especially since Break, we just felt it, right? You guys have seen the many videos on our channel already where we talk about Harmony, MC, etc, etc. But first things first, before we dive into the team compositions, let me just give a quick recap or overview for what Boothill does. Very quickly, you can see it's just like 4 boxes. First things first, this is a character that scales with Break effect, not only in terms of him gaining additional stats from having Break, it caps off roughly around like 300% Break effect, and thereafter you can still go, but 300% is where he gets his max benefit for a lot of crit damage, a lot of crit rate. Not only does he get stats from it, but he does damage to broken enemies, which I think is very interesting. Whoops, this is the wrong box. I think it's the second one here. He basically wants to fight against broken enemies because he's the first character in the game that deals more damage, which scales off his own stats against enemies who are already broken. This is a massive game changer. Of course, I have here he's a ramp up DPS because he needs to get amount of passive in order to strengthen himself over time, which he has with that one-on-one duel that he wants to win, break a bit more enemies, so use a couple of skill so he can get ramping the DPS up towards the end. It's not really a backloaded DPS because he still does a lot of damage in between, but he generally gets stronger the longer the match goes on, which is very cowboy-esque if you ask me. Last but not least, of course, he's very single target, but also a very flexible single target DPS because he implants physical weakness on the enemy. Now, we talked about 4 of this basic kit, and now, you know, we don't waste time on this channel, so let's go ahead and jump right in. Naturally, of course, the first thing that we want to talk about is the Break teams that are available. You see here in tiny numbers is basically the order that I want to talk about on the screen, so to help myself remember what I want to talk about first. First of all, a character that we all have, know and love, Harmony Trailblazer. Why is Harmony Trailblazer one of the best synergies? Not to mention it's free, very cost effective for Boothill. It's because Boothill wants to hit around 300% break effect. We'll talk more in our build guides, but thereabouts is a very nice number to aim because you get the max amount of crit damage for this particular unit. Harmony Trailblazer provides massive amounts of break effect in the game. I think it's best in class right now. The only character that can push, I think, above 100% break effect with a decently well-built Trailblazer. 100% is a lot, means you can focus a lot on your stats on other stuff. Boothill is a very expensive DPS to build. You need crit, you need attack, you want speed, you want break effect, and all the other stuff that DPSs normally want, so you have even more stats to go after, which means that the ceiling and how whales might have this character is way higher, especially if they can get more stats from other places as well. That is one thing that you want to note. A similar character I'll talk about in a little bit, but first let's talk about the second synergy, of course. If any of you lucky people who managed to get her, Runmei is really excellent. And why is Runmei really strong together with Boothill is because Boothill wants to hit weakness broken enemies so that he can deal more damage. He actually gets much stronger against broken enemies. So Runmei extends that with her flowers that she has, which doubles the duration of the weakness break. It basically extends it to 2 turns, meaning that he pops off. He really loves Runmei. Does a lot of damage, not to mention the other damage buff that she provides, the amount of break effect that she also scales with, so she can play in a hybrid break effect kind of team that she also scales off break effect, and etc. So for all that reasons, Boothill does like Runmei quite a lot. If you were to ask me which is better as a support for Boothill, my thought process is Runmei is definitely a lot better because it's much harder to get what she has. To replace Trailblazer, you can easily find it in terms of getting perhaps better stats from your relics, or you can swap your gear around to get more break effect. But Runmei break extension and the amount of buff she provides is very strong. But don't forget, Trailblazer is free, and if a free character is competitive, I think that is something worth mentioning too, which is why I put Trailblazer slightly above. And the next one I want to talk about is Xury. Both of them are number 3, but let's talk about Xury first. So characters that I'm looking for in the pivot slot can either be a sub DPS, a secondary DPS to Boothill, or perhaps a character with a lot of single target synergy with a character like Boothill. I put these 2 characters here because they just amplify how easy it is to break enemies. I think that the value of Silverwolf definitely is questionable with Boothill, so I'll put this much smaller. The one that I want to focus your attention a little bit more on is 2 points. Firstly, Xury is a character that scales very similar to Boothill. She wants a lot of break effect as well. If any of you are trying to get a sense of how much investment you need, try to build your Xury. You will see that the gear that she needs is very, very tough to get her very, very well built, because she wants everything that Boothill wants in a 4-star package as well. Of course, destruction is a different element altogether, different class altogether, but it is what it is. She works very, very well with Boothill, not only because if you have a break effect buffer, you buff 2 DPSs. On top of that, Xury is a colorless breaker, which means that Boothill is able to hit more enemies. This comp can feed well into like a lot more comps, especially if you just want to break the enemy's weakness, so that Boothill can go unga bunga and just whack everything when their weakness broken and stuff like that. She's a very solid DPS, especially since Harmony, Trailblazer and Runmei, both of them are able to buff multiple DPSs and not just one. You can of course like play it like that, where you have both of them on each side, but I'm giving you more options rather than just a simple hyper carry, which we'll talk about in a bit. Silver Wolf, I'll expand more in a bit. Why I put her here is anything that helps you break enemy weaknesses. She's basically a proxy for future characters that implant weaknesses in the enemies. So any character that assists in breaking enemies much quicker is definitely ideal for him. She is a proxy here. I don't think they will form the best comps, other than for the fact that she has very, very massive arrest, shred, and defense down on the enemies, but we'll talk about that in a little bit. Let's talk about the 4th utility slot, of course. Currently, the breaker that is very, very strong from the defensive role in the game is definitely Gallagher. He scales directly with break effect, which is really, really very nice. Does good amounts of damage. The only iffy part is his AI is a little bit iffy. If you guys are okay with that, I think you'll find a lot of value in Gallagher. But one thing for sure, of course, is if you are playing the top row here, or even Runmei instead of Trailblazer, they are very, very squishy, because you have 2 4-stars. Harmony Trailblazer isn't exactly that tanky. His Boothill is like Hunt, so not exactly super tanky either, which is why if you maybe have excess resources, Fucc on the banner with Boothill could be an interesting one to pick up. We'll talk about Fucc in a later video, which will compare both of them and who offers more value, even against the like of other defensive units like Ho eventually. If you're interested in all of that yabba dabba, you can just like check it out on the channel. So last but not least, 5th box here, I want to introduce something a bit different, and we already talked about that a little bit on the channel already, and there are many ways to get extension of break on enemies, and the 5th idea here is actually how I plan to extend weakness break on the enemies, which is through a slow character. Like, well, not literally he is slow, but he slows the enemies a lot, plus he's also imaginary weakness breaking, which is complementary because you hit more elementals, which means you break more enemies much easily as well. He slows enemies, so if you are broken and you are slowed, you basically go even slower, so you recover even slower. So Welt is a very, very good replacement alternative if you do not have Runmei. In fact, a Trailblazer Welt combo could be quite interesting as well, since Welt also could be built as an AoE sub DPS, as a lot of us did in the very early games of Honkai Star Rail as well. So break teams, this is very, very interesting. Let's talk about the next one, which naturally we will want to go into, which is Mono Physical Team. Mono Physical Team is interesting because this man here drops in physical weakness, and if you can see, Silver Wolf has a very, very large portrait here. The reason why I think Boothill is very flexible a character and scales very nicely, although he's like largely a DPS in nature, is for those of you new players in the game who missed Silver Wolf, do not have Silver Wolf. Why Silver Wolf is so good is because she implants weaknesses on the enemies. Having a character that implants weaknesses on an enemy naturally makes them a very, very flexible unit because they can tackle a lot of content. Unfortunately, Silver Wolf is not on the current banner. She is more supportive because she can plant whatever weaknesses. Boothill is specific to physical, which that's why I want to talk about this Mono Physical Team, which we'll expand on in a little bit. So first of all, of course, same thing, broken record by now. Harmony MC is really, really strong. Runmei is really, really strong. Nothing new here. Of course, you have your other supports now in the Mono Physical category, which then adds in a little bit of varying flavor, which is the likes of Robin, which is the likes of Hanya, who are both physical type buffers, so you can benefit from Panacony Land of Dreams. You can benefit even from Planetary Rendezvous, which buffs same type damage from the Light Cone for the Harmony Light Cone. Panacony Land of Dreams is of course the Relic set, which gives them energy restoration and your team physical damage bonus as well. These are 2 strong units from the physical class. Very, very good as well. And Hanya gives quite a lot of speed to a single target. So Boothill can quite benefit well from that as well. So synergies, we are going with one angle of things. The next one I want to talk about is Clara. Clara offers good amounts of AoE physical damage. She acts as an aggro drawer to take away some attention away from your very squishy Harmonies or Boothill, who is a Hunt who naturally has less stats than a tankier character like Destruction or your Abundance Preservation characters. So I think Clara is quite interesting. I would like to, if I had it on my account, I definitely will probably want to play Clara together with Boothill. This is a pretty interesting comp to me at least. Next up, of course, is Luca and Argenti. These two are other alternatives if you do not have Clara from the physical element. Argenti, I think, overall fits better because he offers a lot more speed, you move faster. Boothill generally wants to hit broken enemies, and if your enemies are already broken, Clara can't break them even more because she doesn't do as much damage when enemies are not attacking her. So Argenti definitely plays into the thematic a little bit better. Scales well with break effects because he hits in an AoE fashion, helping you break a lot of enemies. He also acts very, very fast, low amounts of energy restoration rate, able to hit your bets. One is single target Boothill. Argenti is like an AoE character, so you are able to tackle more content at the same time. Luca is an interesting one. I think Luca might come in a little bit more when we have the Apocalyptic Chaos, Apocalyptic Shadow game mode, which might be interesting when we start to require a bit more physical single target DPS. In that case, they could potentially combo together. If not, a character like Susang could also be very, very interesting in this one. The one reason why I don't really like Luca too much is he doesn't really scale off with break effect as much as a character like Boothill. At the end of the day, all the current DPS other than Boothill doesn't really get significant damage bump for break effect other than Xury. That's my only thing, but we have to see more, and we will definitely do a follow-up video on single target damage dealers once Apocalyptic Shadow comes up. Utility slot, of course, the only character that's left for physical right now in the healer slot is Natasha. Maybe someday we'll have a preservation physical, but not for now, I guess. And let's progress and let's graduate from a lot of the mono element teams and let's move on to hyper carry kind of comps. But after this, I want to share with you something interesting, which is what a lot of people might not talk about for Boothill as well. Simple hyper carry, you can go two routes. There are two main routes. The first route on top is the very typical Harmony character buffing, which will synergize. You can either, like, if you have Runmei and Harmony Trailblazer, you want to go for something like this. If you only have Trailblazer, you can take the bottom route. But utility is kind of straightforward. You want to go for anyone that buffs the main DPS as much as you can. Ho-Ho is really good, but any of the other preservation, of course, does quite fine as well. Ho-Ho is the one that whole kit is basically geared towards buffing the rest of the team for attack, for energy restoration, which Boothill both needs as well. That's why I put a picture here, but really you're comfortable with most of the other sustains. The other road for going for a hyper carry Boothill road is choosing the alternative of turn manipulation. And this is not talked about too much, but I think a comp of pick one of these three or even two of them and slap them together, and you just keep Boothill moving up and up. For example, you have Bronya here, and maybe you have like Sparkle. My shapes are going all out of the place. You have Bronya here, and maybe you have Robin in this slot. Bronya pushes her up, Robin pushes everyone up. You have Sparkle here, you have a lot of skill points. Bronya pushes Boothill, Sparkle pushes Boothill, a lot of crit damage allocated to him, which he skills off very well with. You just keep cycling into Boothill, and one of the things that we talked about in the very first beginning of this video is he's a character that gradually ramps up the more of the standoff that he wins. So he gets more buffs, he breaks a lot of physical weakness as well. The more he outs, the more he moves, the more weakness he places on the enemies as well, or you can change your targets and whatnot. So it's very, very good versatility, especially if you can get your turn action moving. And that is, I think, another way of playing this particular character is by pumping him up in terms of movement speed, versatility and stuff like that. In terms of the pivot section, the two interesting characters that you have is defense breakers. Especially if you do not have maybe Runmei, you can go for a Harmony buffer here and maybe a defense breaker in your pivot slot, which helps you not only get some buffing, but you also get debuffing on the enemies to get a bit more control on them as well. Silver Wolves gives very, very good amounts of single target defense breaking, same as Pella, good amounts of single target, good amounts of AoE defense breaking as well, good multipliers as well. So these are two ways of doing it. But now beyond that, let me just put all of them in one and let's change this up a little bit. I think he is a super flexible sub DPS, and that's something that's not really touched on quite a lot in a lot of guides that you'll see out there. And the main reason is the whole landscape that we currently have today, he's the only one that is scaling with break effect other than Xury, which naturally makes him a more contender for a main DPS role. However, if we had a DPS, a main DPS, who scales off with break, so a main DPS break here in very, very small fonts, but don't worry, I will narrate it. If we eventually have a main DPS break character who is very, very strong, I don't know, maybe sometime in future, Boothill is actually very, very good for the long term in terms of being a flexible sub DPS. I would say very similar to the likes of Blade for a roster that contain, for example, a main DPS like Jingliu, who Blade is like a really, really good second sidekick but still doing a lot of damage. Boothill, in my opinion, is very similar to Blade in that sense. He will fit into most comps that benefit from break. He's just going to be at the side doing his own thing, shooting, standing off, weakness breaking, very independent because he just is applicable in so many sense. Very similar to the likes of a character like Xury, who is very, very versatile, but versatile generally for their own self kind of thing because they are more DPS in nature, unlike of course like Silverwolf and stuff like that. So that is one angle of thinking about it. And when we do have a main DPS breaker, best team compositions for that main DPS breaker might involve Boothill just simply because the amount of damage that 2 DPSs do rather than 1, as we know that is how the game is gravitating towards. And the more characters you have on a team, the faster you break enemies as well, because you have more units dishing out amazing break, which is the whole fundamental of break effect and why I think they're like selling them so hard now. So that's the unique thing that I wanted to touch on. Last but not least, 2 more that I have. As you always know, we always talk about this. Husbando team comps. I know some of you really like Boothill because of his design, and maybe you're just a pure Husbando player. Many ways of playing this character, and for the first time ever, if you guys didn't realize, this is the first time we have a 5-star harmony character. All of the other 5-star harmonies or harmony characters for the matter of fact are all female. Trailblazer, if you chose the male variant, is the only one who is a male harmony unit right now. So I think probably best in slot for synergy. Other than that, and this is really just a fun non-meta team, doesn't mean it's bad, it's just how we like to play the game, enjoy the game a bit more. For any of you out there who care about this, I understand as well, so I want to touch on this. Argenti, good amounts of break. Physical, as we touched on already. Weld, also really good because you slow the enemies a bit more. Good amounts of AoE. These 2 characters complement Boothill's style, enabling you to play this comp into more different variety of situations, so you can just play your favorite team wherever. I think these 2 characters are really, really fun to play in the pivot slot. Utility slot, you have many, many choices. There's so many like good Husbando defensive units. Aventurine is very strong. I think Aventurine probably will be the most comfortable to play right now as of version 2.2. Gallagher, of course, technically scales the best together with Harmony Trailblazer. So if you're looking for a bit more scaling synergy, Gallagher might be the option. He's of course a 4-star with less HP stats and stuff like that. But otherwise, any of the 3 GigaChat 5-star male characters probably will suffice for a lot of your sustain needs as well. That's the Husbando team. But last but not least, let's talk about a free-to-play team, because that's something that's very, very important on this channel. Not all of you might come in with Doctor Ratio and stuff, so I want to give you some options as well. Not just talking about Doctor Ratio, which is the people who joined slightly earlier. Maybe you just recently heard about Honkai Star Rail, so welcome to the game. This is an example of a free-to-play team I want to talk about. You have the very strong free Harmony Trailblazer. Make sure you use it. Gives a lot of break effect. Other options that you have are either fast-moving characters who benefits from, of course, Harmony Trailblazer's effect. You hit the enemies more, you basically give more super break damage, more damage to the entire team. Servile, Susang are 2 characters that move very fast. If you are bringing this comp into a single target domain, Susang is going to work very well with, for example, Boothill because of his single target implanting of physical weakness, and Susang is very excellent at breaking weaknesses to help them both pop off at the same time. Servile just moves a lot. AoE in nature, gets her burst up real quick, so you can hit your bets against physical. You can still get some lightning here and there to deal more damage. Natasha, of course, is the cheapest alternative. You could argue Lynx is good here, but since none of them really draw aggro in this team composition, you could put Lynx in your second half, and for a free-to-play player, just stick to Natasha for a while. At least you can get some break off every now and then with Boothill's out and Natasha's single target when you're trying to get some skill points back. And if you found this video helpful, I think it's very interesting if we talk about the differences and in terms of investment potential of these two characters, especially when you put them side by side with a character like Topaz and Nambi. If you don't have both, which do I think is actually better currently and in the long term? Check this video out, and guys, thank you so much for watching. We do this every single patch. Like and subscribe for more such future content. See you in the next video.